Chapter 6. Their respective nights. Just past evening that same day, in a guest room of Liselot's mansion in Amand. Duke Huguenot had finished his dinner and was listening to the captain of the elite guard, Raymond Brandt, give his report. The investigation squad didn't return? Duke Huguenot asked with a furrowed brow. Yes, I believe something unforeseen must have happened, Raymond reported with a pale face. Something unforeseen? Did we not discuss forming an advance squad with our knights with a focus on fighting ability and mobility in order to deal with that? Duke Huguenot asked detachedly. It would mean that the dispatched squad encountered a difficulty not even they could deal with. Do you mean to say a higher number of monsters were lurking than expected? It is also possible that they simply had an accident, Raymond said with difficulty. While the probability wasn't zero, they were still knights that had undergone training. There was nothing more shameful than to have run into such trouble in the forest beside the city. Very well. You may leave. I will send a directive shortly, Duke Huguenot ordered, sighing deeply. Understood. Raymond nodded with a stiff voice, then turned around. After a moment, the door swung shut. It seems we really are lacking soldiers with military capability. That squad should have included Alphonse, too. So he really was incompetent. Duke Huguenot's irritated voice echoed through the empty room. Meanwhile, elsewhere in Liselot's mansion, Hiroaki was having after-dinner tea with Flora and Roanna in a guest living room separate to the guest bedrooms. The usually talkative Hiroaki was drinking tea silently for some reason. Flora also seemed a little dazed, but she was never very chatty to begin with. It's quiet. Roanna quietly watched Hiroaki's face, observing his vastly different behavior. Ha! With his teacup in hand, Hiroaki let out a long-suffering sigh. He seemed to be clearly exhibiting the signs of worrying about something. However, Flora remained in her dazed state, unresponsive to how oddly Hiroaki was behaving. Princess Flora also seems listless. I wonder what's gotten into her and Sir Hiroaki. Roanna was unable to stand the strange air in the room any longer. Sir Hiroaki, is something the matter? She asked nervously. Chem? What? Hiroaki replied in a rather curt voice. Roanna mustered her courage to speak up. You don't seem to be very happy. If there's anything bothering you. At that, even Flora finally noticed their conversation, turning her ear towards them. Nah, it's not that anything's the matter, Hiroaki said, shaking his head exaggeratedly. Contrary to his words, his attitude clearly showed something was wrong, so Roanna quietly waited for him to continue speaking. Don't you think Flora is acting weirder than me? Hiroaki suddenly said, turning to Flora. Huh? Taken aback, Flora's body shook. Hiroaki watched her silently. Did I do something strange? Flora cocked her head in confusion. So you're not aware of it? Ever since we were attacked by the monsters, you've been restless, like your heart isn't really in it, Hiroaki said with slight displeasure. Roanna made a face of realization as something sprung to mind. I don't believe that's true. Flora shook her head with a frown. Well, if that's what you insist, then fine. It just seemed like that was the case to me, but what you say is probably right, Hiroaki said sharply. The way he phrased it was enough for Flora to feel the need to confirm. What did I look like to you? Well, as an example, you seem to be rather interested in that man. You were always watching his face, you know? Hiroaki said, watching Flora's reaction with a sidelong glance. By that man, you mean, Do you mean Sir Haruto? She said hesitantly. Yeah. So you're aware that the man I'm talking about is Haruto, Hiroaki said in an ill-tempered tone. No. That's. Flora had no idea why Hiroaki would say such a thing. Being that she was raised as a princess, she was hardly pressed by others as it concerned her speech or actions. When combined with her natural disposition, she had no idea how to deal with it. Princess Flora represents all of us, so she is probably troubled by how to properly express gratitude towards him for saving us from our predicament. There's also the fact Duke Huguenot seems to be trying to scout him, Roanna said immediately, supporting Flora. I see. Is that true? Hiroaki asked somewhat dubiously. Why yes, Flora said, nodding awkwardly. Well, I suppose I can understand that much. But still, that Haruto. Don't you think you're all acting a little too excited about him? Hiroaki said with skepticism. That's because you are so powerful. When your own position is so far above, it makes those surrounding you appear lower. For us regular people, he seems plenty amazing. Roanna explained, complimenting Hiroaki in the same breath. If it were Flora, she probably wouldn't have been able to make something up on the spot as cleverly. Ah, I see. So that's how it is. Well, in that case, I guess it can't be helped. Hiroaki's pride was pleased to receive the praise, making him smirk. For Roanna's sake, I'll quietly accept that for today, he thought. However, he was still disappointed in Flora. Honestly, I can always count on Roanna to have a lively conversation. Flora's cute, but there's nothing beyond that. Hiroaki spent time with Flora and Roanna on a daily basis, so he already knew what their personalities were like. Flora could be summarized in one word: shy. To put it nicely, she was reserved, but if one chose to be harsh, you could say she was gloomy. She didn't seem to be used to socializing with men, so she barely spoke when she was in the presence of the opposite gender. Even when she was with Hiroaki, who she knew fairly well by now, there were awkward silences at times. At the very least, she wasn't the type of girl to aggressively pursue men. The fact that she assertively tried to talk to Haruto, despite that, didn't sit right. He couldn't help but feel unsatisfied that she was acting proactive towards the wrong person. He was thinking selfishly. Hiroaki didn't seem to be aware of it himself, but contrary to his aspirations, he didn't have the guts to go about forming human relations all that well by himself. That's what made him both easy and difficult to handle at the same time. He was a spoiled and troublesome man. Flora bid farewell to Hiroaki and Roanna once the conversation died down and returned to the guest bedroom she had been allocated. Lizelot's attendants helped her prepare a bath and change of clothes, leaving her to flop onto the bed afterwards. Was I really that strange today? She was bothered by what Hiroaki had pointed out earlier. He had said she was showing too much interest in Haruto, and seemed rather unhappy about it. However, it was an undeniable fact that she was interested in Haruto. Ryo. Haruto. Their names are different. Their hair colors are different. He had acquaintances that he had been with for a long time. That's why he should be a different person, and yet, she couldn't help but overlap the sight of Haruto fighting the Minotaur from behind and of Ryo, who had fought the Minotaur during the Academy's outdoor drill in order to save Flora. It was why she couldn't help but stare at Haruto all day today. If the others around her found it strange, then it was possible that Haruto thought the same. I'm so hopeless. Flora felt a strong sense of self-hatred. Her head was spinning, unable to keep up with her thoughts, but she continued to question herself. What do I even want to do about it, anyway? If Sir Haruto really is Ryo, what would I do? She couldn't possibly confirm it by asking him, but even if Haruto really was Ryo, she doubted he would tell her the truth. After all, the Kingdom of Beltrum had once pushed a false accusation on Ryo, then returned his favor with enmity instead. There was no taking back that sin. Do I apologize? What we did was something unforgivable, though. Did she really want him to forgive her? If so, it seemed far too convenient for her. Once she reached that conclusion, she hated herself even more than she had earlier. Her face twisted with tears. A short while ago, in a drawing room of Lizelot's mansion, and that's what happened. At present, the status of our knights is unknown, but it would be appropriate to assume that they have run into some kind of trouble, Duke Huguenot explained. He'd requested an emergency audience with Lizelot to report how the dispatched knights had yet to return. I am sorry. I should have sent out personnel from my side too, Lizelot apologized with a shamed expression. No, I was the one who requested that the advance squad be formed from our knights. It's hard to believe that a squad of 20 knights lacked the combat power for an initial investigation. If anything, one would normally consider it overkill. Duke Huguenot shook his head with a bitter smile. Without an escort target to protect getting in the way, 20 knights was enough to take down a Minotaur. He had sent them with that in mind. If that hadn't been enough, then this could no longer be called anything but bad luck. Even so, Lizelot started to say something mournfully. However, Duke Huguenot lifted a hand to stop her. It's not confirmed that they were entirely wiped out, though I suppose it is hard to imagine that they've simply become lost wandering the forest. However, we should be considering what to do next. Do I have that right? Duke Huguenot stated calmly. Yes. However, in the event that the worst has happened, I will provide the maximum compensation, Liselot said in a resolute voice after taking in a deep breath. I apologize for being even more of a burden, but this is not an issue that should go unaddressed. We will do our best to resolve the situation. Let's pull ourselves together. I appreciate that. As much as I want to send a follow-up squad right away, if an unforeseen situation has happened to as many as 20 knights, I must be careful in selecting personnel. It was no exaggeration to say that the title of a knight was proof that a human had obtained military ability of the highest degree. Certain powerful, leading figures who could use enchanted swords and run through the battlefield displaying their superhuman prowess by temporarily enhancing their physical abilities with magic or sorcery were merely exceptions. Of course, knights had differences in individual strength and squads had differences in experience, but there was no overlooking a formation of 20 knights being caught off guard. Thus, the squad to be sent next needed to be selected with more military power, either by increasing the overall quantity or raising the individual quality. If it's come to this, I'll have to send Arya, Liselot thought. Arya was the strongest subordinate she had. She normally kept Arya beside her as a guard, but she'd have to mobilize her in this situation. If you do send one, make it after daybreak. At earliest, after the sun rises. There's still the possibility they'll suddenly make their way back in the morning. I would say noon would be latest to reach a conclusion. Do you agree? Duke Huguenot said with a contemplative look. While it was a little slow-paced, it would be reckless to enter the forest at night. If the search party ran into trouble, their efforts would be meaningless. Yes, Liselot nodded immediately, having thought exactly the same. However, I do believe most of the monsters were cleaned up in the earlier battle. There were some monsters that fled back into the forest, but I don't really want to consider that possibility. You mean to imply that there might be minotaurs left behind, is that correct? Duke Huguenot and Liselot frowned together. As an estimate, there were roughly several hundred monsters that attacked them earlier, a number no normal city would have in their vicinity even if they were all rounded up. On top of that, minotaurs weren't commonly spotted monsters to begin with. For several of them to be lurking about made the situation far too irregular. Perhaps. If I were to assume the worst-case scenario, there could be more monsters than what appeared earlier still lurking. Although it's not something I want to believe, Duke Huguenot said bitterly. If that assumption were true, it would mean over 1,000 monsters were hidden in the area surrounding Amand. Liselot also nodded bitterly. Agreed. If that many monsters were completely overlooked in the vicinity of the city, then it's even stranger. But such preconceptions are what led us to the current situation anyway. She scolded her own naivety. I intend to send Arya out for this. I will also select several proficient attendants and soldiers and lend them enchanted swords. She normally only allowed Arya to carry an enchanted sword, but she was going all out this time. Understood. I would like nothing more than to offer some of my knights, but no, there is no need to mobilize any more of your knights for us. The next party shall be formed by my forces, Liselot said in an orderly manner. With 20 knights missing in the current situation, she couldn't allow him to move any more of his personnel. Duke Huguenot nodded heavily and brought up Haruto, who would be most reliable after his great earlier performance. I understand. Then may I suggest that you inquire if Haruto would be willing to lend his assistance? It would be one thing to rely on an adventurer of Amand, but Sir Haruto is merely a commoner. Not to mention there are also women in his company. Liselot shook her head respectfully. True, one would normally turn to adventurers for cases like this. Yes. But I will not be using adventurers this time. With such a high possibility of minotaurs still around, it's possible the monsters might follow some kind of leadership like they did during the road attack. Preparations should be made in case Amand is attacked while short-handed. The biology of monsters wasn't well understood, but it was known that they swarmed around powerful individuals and moved under their leadership towards a target. The monsters that had attacked them on the road were clearly following some kind of leadership, so it was most likely that a minotaur or humanoid monster had been leading the horde. And if there really were minotaurs remaining, it was highly likely they would make planned movements, at worst placing the city in danger of attack. There were rarely any adventurers with skill on par with knights, but they were many in number. If the monsters attacked in droves, They would be a reliable source of combat power. That is a most justified decision, Duke Huguenot said, nodding worriedly. Meanwhile, in the depths of the forest west of Amand, Lucius and Rhys were seated around a campfire. Surrounding them were countless dark-skinned revenants, standing silently. It made an extremely eerie sight. The bodies recreated towards the end should be completely settled soon. Rhys chuckled in satisfaction as he looked around at the revenants. Good to hear. But the way they swarm around pisses me off. Put them away already, Lucius demanded uneasily. Oh, I would have liked to keep my new collection up for a little longer to gaze upon them. Ha, you really are a creepier bastard than I am. Rhys grinned. Why, that's because they're basically my children. But if you insist, then I suppose I have no choice, he said, breathing a small sigh. The revenants standing around them immediately began to sink into the earth. I can finally breathe again. Now I can have a good night's rest, at least, Lucius huffed through his nose in satisfaction. The plan will be set in motion tomorrow morning, before the sun rises. Make sure you don't sleep in. Hey, who do you think you're talking to? I suppose you would never sleep in before a fight, Rhys said with a chuckle. If you're going to worry about sleeping in, worry about our Alphonse, our newest member, over there. Right. Hey, Lucius bantered lightly, looking over at the third person sitting by the fire to warm up. There sat a revenant with jet-black skin far darker than the dark grey skin of the other revenants, silently watching on. HMPH. In that case, you should have let me go to Amand alone and clean up everything before the other defectives settle in. The jet-black revenant named Alphonse huffed unhappily through his nose before boasting in a terribly ghastly voice. Ha ha ha, what a revolting voice, Lucius said lightly, mouth turned in a carefree grin. This is the final form of the revenant. While it is notably more powerful and aggressive than the enhanced version, it's all intellect and no reason, making it difficult to handle, Rhys muttered tiredly. But he'll be of use in tomorrow's attack, no? Lucius asked, his mouth in a relaxed grin. Rhys nodded in exasperation. Well, yes, as a disposable pawn, anyway. His mouth twisted faintly in a repulsive smile. Well, that's what it's gonna be. We have high expectations of you, Alphonse, Lucius said brightly, his smile completely hollow. The jet-black revenant nodded, his reply disjointed. Yeah, I'll kill them. All of them. Nothing but hatred swirled within those eyes that had lost all sense of reason. Ha ha. How hopeless. Lucius' disgusted laugh echoed throughout the quiet forest.